What's up, guys? It's Philly Wonka here, and today's video is going to be a little bit of a personal one. So, over the past few years, I've been going on and off Instagram, mostly because I felt like there was a lot of overwhelm that was associated with being on that app. It felt like I could not be myself while I was on that app. It was quite a lot of stimulation to take all at once. And what I kept doing was that for 3 or 4 months of the year, I would come on Instagram and then I would leave. And the last time that I left, I think I have left it for good. Now, I might be wrong, I might come back, but as of right now, I don't feel like coming back on. And there are multiple reasons why. First being is the overstimulation. It's just way too much stimulation for my for me to be sane in a way, and I don't know how people do it. More power to them for those who can be on Instagram and not have that affect their work. I am not one of them. My work gets disrupted very quickly every time I come back on Instagram. It's a trend that I've noticed in myself, and that's why I tend to stay away from it. When people ask me why you're not on Instagram, because every time I make a new connection, there tends to be that exchange where they ask you for your Instagram, and I have to let them know that I don't. And most people are just taken aback, asking why, how come, how are you a creator that does not have Instagram? And quite honestly put, and this might be a fault of my own, is that I never got any creative work out of Instagram, in the sense that I never got clients out of Instagram the way that most people have gotten, at least in the creator circle that I am so involved with. For me, Instagram was just a place for me to share things and to get to know what other people were doing. So the time wasted on trying to build a portfolio on Instagram stopped being justifiable because it wasn't getting me anywhere, and the trade-offs were just not worth it. Another point that I want to stress on is the fact that my identity became so tied to the online persona that I created, and it always felt the need to live up to that persona because honestly, that persona was maybe 50% better than who I actually was in real life. Sometimes even 100% or 200%. You really can't put a metric on it, but I felt like that was such a high ideal to live up to on your day-to-day basis that sometimes when people used to get referred to me through my Instagram, like before a friend introduction or a potential relationship introduction, when they used to stalk my Instagram and I was not that person, it just felt like a lot of pressure to live up to somebody that you're not, on a day-to-day basis. You're not just a culmination of your highlights, you're also the product of all of your failures. And that's something that really icked me when I was on Instagram, that people used to just expect something of me which I wasn't. And that often led to disappointment. So I could not handle the fact that my identity, me, who I am, was quite landlocked to the online persona of me as Philly Wonka on Instagram. Another point of contention is that every time I'm on Instagram, I tend to follow people. Last time when I didn't, but I don't think that's very valuable to bring up. But when I was following people, I started comparing myself to other people's highlights. Being young and being in a creator economy space, whatever you would like to call it, it brings a lot of feelings of anxiety as to what the future has ahead of you, because despite what most people have you to believe through their Instagram account, we don't have things figured out. Our lives are a mess, and some lives are lesser of a mess than the others. But more often than not, we just don't have anything sorted for ourselves. And when you see other people's highlights and see that they're doing well for themselves, it often brings you down because you're questioning whether you are doing something wrong yourself. And why is it that that person got the success that they did when it should have really come to you? And that made me love myself a lot lesser than I would have liked to. And ever since going off Instagram, or the periods of intensity where I leave Instagram and I choose to focus on myself and grow myself, is when I've seen that I've had the most love for myself. And that love manifests into opportunities and doors which I thought would never open for me. And I think that's something that needs to be stressed, because life is often different for so many different people. We're not dealing with the same psyche. We're not dealing with the same family dynamics. There's a lot at play over here. And it's not really fair that you compare your life with somebody else's. And I think this is going to be my favorite point of leaving Instagram, which is that there is a certain sense of freedom of not being chained to an app that 99% of people are chained to. And I think that's kind of empowering, because it's always a follow-up question with the creator friends that I have, is that, like, how do you find work when you're not on Instagram? Like, how does that work? It baffles them. And to me, I was also kind of worried in a sense that I might not get work when I left Instagram, because I no longer had a portfolio to show people, even if it was through word of mouth, to link back to my Instagram, be like, yeah, this is my repository of work. You can go through this. It's just easier and more efficient that way, rather than sending a Google Drive link which has a bunch of your works. Because if you're in the space, you know that the easiest the person that shows their work the easiest often gets the clients the most. It's just how it is. Clients don't have time to waste when it comes to reviewing a creator's work before they select them, until and unless the client's hands are tied. So I kept it quite a challenge for myself to really charm the clients with my verbal skills, as well as my presentability on a day-to-day basis, and sort of impress them in that way and sort of get clients that way. And that's how most of my clients are today, where they're just impressed with who I am as a person and the kind of morale that I bring to the team, more than the work that I bring to the team. Because there are so many people that are better than me, but not a lot of people bring the same kind of energy that I do, which really elevates the mood of the set or the project that you're involved in. So I think for a lot of reasons, I would consider that it is a flex of sorts, that I'm able to do the work that most people seem or most people deem to be not as efficient, and really bring it on a challenge to myself to do it the unconventional way, because I want to get results that 99% of people don't get. And the only way to go about it is by not doing what 99% of people do. That's a firm belief that I have. And maybe I'm getting left out in the race at the present moment, but this is not about short-term gains. This is not a short-term race that I'm trying to win. It's not a sprint. I'm trying to win a marathon. And in order to win a marathon, if you have a sprinter's mentality, you're more likelier than not going to be gassed by the initial stages of the marathon, and the person that paces himself is bound to get the most amount of reward in the long term. So I think that's a pretty good analogy to describe the mental framework that I've adopted to justify staying away from Instagram, even though it is the biggest thing right now. The other point that I want to bring about is that when I left Instagram, I felt like I was liberating my mind of the mental real estate that Instagram consumed, and I was leaving a lot of space to grow and to nurture myself when it comes to learning new things or picking up new skills, the works. And what I mean by that is most people show me their Instagram screen time when I bring to the point that Instagram sucks up a lot of your time by saying, hey, listen, like I only spend an hour on Instagram, as if to justify spending an hour on Instagram is good. But it's not necessarily about the hour that you spend on Instagram, because an hour is not that much of your day that's spent on an app. If you want to take a more objective standpoint to it, because there are people that have a bigger Instagram problem that have spent 8 hours a day on Instagram, that sort of situation. I don't know how you guys operate, by the way. If you spend 8 hours on Instagram, please, like, help me understand how your psyche works, because it's beyond baffling to me. But I'm digressing. It's not really about the hour that you spend on Instagram, right? It's more about how that hour is spaced in between the day. That really matters, because if you're using Instagram for 30 seconds every 10 minutes, it's still not enough of a time for you to get into the state of having a deep sense of focus, which I've been able to sort of get over the past 3 years just being on and off Instagram. Like, I can now dedicate my time and effort into listening to a 2.5 hour, 3 hour lecture on YouTube without feeling the need to be bored, if you want to put it that way. So it brought that sense of focus to my mind. Like, I can now focus on a task for an extended period of time. But while I was on Instagram, that was not really the case. I could not focus on anything meaningful for more than 10 minutes before having the need to want to check the app and just to like refresh my mind with the things that would keep me mentally stimulated. And that was a real big problem, especially because of the work that I wanted to do, which involved a lot of active learning, which I was not able to do through using a medium like Instagram, because everything was just so short format, and the things that I used to consume on a day-to-day basis just used to go over my head. And I was not necessarily learning anything fruitful or useful for the long term. And the last point that I want to stress on is that when you leave Instagram, when you let go of that online identity that people are so attached to, that they have nurtured 7 or 8 years of their life into growing and to displaying, when you disassociate from that, I can understand how that's quite painful, because if we are conceptual beings and Instagram is a concept that we create in our mind, and it is an identity that we have nurtured and grown. And if that's taken away from you, it feels like your arm has been stripped away from you. At least the pain is quite similar metaphorically, of course, when you think about it in the mental state, right? What I've come to realize is that pain was the price to pay for the admission of a very private life, a life where I can relinquish on the mystery of who I am really. You probably have an idea of who I am as a person, but you really don't know much about that except for listening to me speaking in this video. And I think that's a power to hold in this present day and age where people can get a general outlook on who you are quite quickly when they just get to see your Instagram profile. And that takes away the power of the element of surprise, of being able to sorry, I lost my train of thought. I don't know if the camera is focusing right. I'm seeing it go bizarre. Okay, perfect. Got it. But yeah, I now value how important it is to have a private life. In a sense, I really value what it's like to have a private life because it is a peaceful fucking life. And that peace brings about so many different avenues for you to learn and grow and to explore who you are as a person, and not have the fear of judgment of what other people might think when you are making something radical in your life, because your identity does not hinge upon other people's opinions anymore. It starts to become a lot more free, a lot more fluid. And because of that, you get to have the upper hand in deciding who you are as a person. And so letting go, or rather burning that identity of who Philly Wonka was on Instagram, sort of paved the new path for me to be explorative of who even Philly Wonka is, or even if Philly Wonka is the identity that I want to move ahead with. And I think that there is a certain sense of power and there definitely is a case to be made when you think about the aikidoing of that process of being like, fuck it, I can be whoever I want and be happy with that, rather than thinking twice about what other people might think about you. Because more often than not, I've observed in so many people that if we go to a restaurant, the meal that they order is in some small way tied to how aesthetically it is presented, so that they can post a picture of it on their Instagram story. And disassociating from that very need that is so primal in its nature to get the validation of other people has been so freeing. And I cannot imagine a life where I go back to that anymore. So hopefully this has given you a little bit of an argument, if you will, to persuade you into swaying the other direction and to embrace a life where you're not really living in the cloud, but rather living in the present and absorbing the full detail that life has to offer. Because that's what leaving Instagram has done for me. And that's why I don't want to come back to it anymore, because I see that the negatives outweigh the positives in an exponential margin. So hopefully this was valuable. I look forward to making more such videos that hopefully encourage you to think a little differently and to make you act in a way that's not instinctual and a little counterintuitive, because life often has a theme of being counterintuitive in nature. But enough rambling. Philly Wonka is out with this. In terms of a few updates that I have to share, over the past few weeks, few months, I have been extremely fascinated with AI and the prospect of learning AI. And that's something that I want to share with you on this channel, especially when it comes to large language models and discussing how that can be beneficial for your personal life when you can garner the power of AI and machine learning and retrieval augmented generation systems. And basically, I honestly don't know what all of these terms really mean. Like, I have a surface level understanding. I'm trying to dive deeper and peel behind the curtain to reveal what it truly is. But from that surface level of understanding, I now know that it is quite powerful, and I can see how this can tremendously improve my life. So stay tuned for more content that will be catered towards that segment if you're interested towards that. I'm going to be leveraging more of AI tools for my philosophy and for my personal development work. And to do that very methodically involves the AI knowing a little bit about you. And that's what I'm trying to do with this whole thing. So if all of that seems extremely new to you and you're interested in what that might be, stick around, because that's going to be the next wave of my content. This is what I'm going to be devoting the next 6 months of my life to, simply because I see the profound value in actually doing this work. And yeah, thank you for sticking around. I really appreciate you watching all the way up until this point. Willy Wonka is out for reals, and I'll see you guys next episode. Peace.